Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a beautiful 26th of May, 2024. A beautiful Sunday evening it is. Come up in this podcast, NATO and the fire tax. Of course, criticism for our NATO allies because of our really lackluster defense spending and leadership. And Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau banter back and forth in Parliament over the carbon tax. The fire tax to protect us all minions from the oncoming onslaught of the climate emergency. All that and more come on the podcast. Please stick around. Listener view discretion is advised because I might smoke a cigarette and I definitely will swear and I'll make some real funny faces. See you in a bit.
Hit it, sweetheart. Because I am hard, you will not like me.
Yes, sir.
There is no racial bigotry here. Here you are all equally worthless.
From Western Canada, this is the Crusty Canuck podcast, a Canadian veteran's point of view on political, social, economic issues and life. Here's Crusty.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the episode 284 of the Crusty Canuck podcast. Hope you're all settled in. Hope you had a good weekend so far. And just to remind you, this podcast is brought to you in part by and supported by Veterans for Freedom Network. That's right. Veterans for Freedom Stand 2. Link will be in the description. And coming soon, Veterans for Freedom TV. That's right. Yours truly and other like-minded veterans and other Canadians. Hopefully we'll be on a network sponsored by Veterans for Freedom. So Veterans for Freedom TV coming soon. Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Crusty Duck. Hope you've had a good weekend. I've been working my tuchus off. You know, my wife's been working her ass off too. So we're trying to make ends meet as we speak. But it's getting there. Weather's getting better, so let us enjoy the weather as best we can without going to the poorhouse because our government overseers want to see it. But like the title card said, NATO and the fire tax. And if you like to hear what you see, please click like and subscribe. Share this content all of your social media platforms too. Don't hesitate to give me a thumbs up and a like. Give me a comment or two if you see this on Rumble and on YouTube. And a special thank you to my new subscribers on YouTube and to Rumble. Thank you very much to my Rumblers out there, my new Rumblers. Do not hesitate to say hello. And to anybody who's watching me on the Rumble channel, I don't need any help with SEOs. Okay, I'll say that to you right now. Don't give me a sales gimmick. Don't give me a sales pitch. I don't want to bloody hear it. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you do. Well, to my other Rumblers out there, have you ever noticed that if you're low on viewer and descriptions, if you're low on views and all that, there's always some clown that comes from certain Fiverr pages that will say they do a CEO for you, make you feel good. Yeah, don't do it. It's a scam. They'll take anywhere from $25, $50 from you. They'll tell you to distribute here, distribute there, and they won't do it. They'll give you fake bots, fake accounts, fake views, and fake comments. Don't follow for it. So this is a warning out there to anyone who sees me on Rumble and they want to sell me an SEO. Forget it. It's not going to happen. Anyway, carrying on with this episode 284, NATO and the fire tax. So because it's wildfire season, we've got the federal government all up in arms, right, because of the whole wildfire season, and they're trying to justify the tax yet again. Now, I'm going to ask, I've asked this before, ladies and gentlemen, I have asked this before, how can a tax help you or help us in this dire climate crisis? How? It can't, right? So this carbon tax is basically promoting a virtue. And it's promoting nothing but, how do you say, financial inequities, insecurities, right? How is it helping the general populace? There's a little tidbit out there that comes from Rebel Media, and I'll cue the video up here shortly. But of course, our beloved Prime Minister and his followers alike are constantly saying it's going to help the environment because we got to have a price on pollution. Well, you got to have a price on people that actually make one hell of a mess. I can understand that. You know, if you get a pulp and paper mill or any kind of refinery or any kind of chemical plant that's caught dumping chemicals or bad things into a water stream or into a waterway. Now, historically, they have done that back in the 50s and 60s. They didn't think twice about it. But now you get caught doing that, then your business practically shut down. But you can see in the rhetoric that you're going to see between Pierre and Justin in this video I'm going to show you. And you're going to hear it too. Just a back and forth bantering about how it's going to save the world and how this is going to save this and save that. The same old rehearsed regurgitation, the same old rehearsed verbal diarrhea that comes from our beloved Prime Minister to justify his lackluster performance and his lackluster efforts as leader of this country. So I'll just cue this up here for you too, ladies and gentlemen. And you just listen amongst yourselves. You decide, right? You decide, because every time this man speaks, it's just garbage. It is. No one believes him anymore. No one likes him anymore. Just take your ball and go home, Justin. Like, come on, eh? What are you doing, man? Like, really? What are you doing? But he's just really, he has no right being in politics. So you, my wonderful audience, I'll let you decide. You listen and think among yourselves.
Pierre Poilievre asked Trudeau how high his carbon tax would have to be to get the forest fires to stop. And then Justin Trudeau said, if you don't think that taxes change the weather or stop cigarette butts from flying out of car windows, that you are engaging in climate denialism at its finest.
Prime Minister's carbon tax applies on barns, on grain drying, on fertilizers, on off-farm vehicles. It costs literally tens of thousands of dollars for many individual farmers, all of which gets passed on. But the Prime Minister, instead of defending his taxes, resorted to a really wacko and unhinged claim that if Canadians just paid more taxes, there would be suddenly less fires. I thought that water and not taxes put out fires. But maybe the Prime Minister can clarify, how high would his tax have to go for forest fires to stop?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing the impacts of the extreme weather events that come from climate change that are unfortunately getting worse and worse every year. That is why our government from 2015 onwards has stepped up in the fight against climate change, because not only are we reducing Canada's emissions to the lowest level outside the pandemic in 25 years, but we're also stepping up in the jobs and technological innovations that the world needs to successfully fight climate change. We will continue to fight climate change, Mr. Speaker, and put more money in people's pockets while he sits with his arms crossed and
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He didn't answer my question. Now he says that his taxes are going to make Canada a high-tech wonderland. Before, his claim was that it was going to stop forest fires. It's him that made the link, not me. Obviously, I think the link between the two is absolutely ridiculous, because his tax is not an environmental plan. It's a money collecting plan. It's a plan of government greed. So I'll ask the question again. He wants to hike the tax to 61 cents a liter. If it gets to that high and people are all starving in the streets, will that stop the forest fires?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the Leader of the Opposition's desire to make clever rhetorical points, he actually completely ignores the basic facts. The price on pollution is revenue neutral for the federal government. That means the money that comes in for the price on pollution, for the carbon tax, gets returned to the jurisdictions, and is why the Parliamentary Budget Officer found 8 out of 10 Canadian families in jurisdictions where the carbon price applies do better with the Canada carbon rebate that comes in 4 times a year than the price on pollution costs them. That's a plan to fight climate change and put money in people's pockets.
This goes on for another minute or so. And we're just going to all get stupider from watching Justin Trudeau tell us that this is climate denialism at its finest. How dare you, conservatives, not believe that giving money to the federal government will stop arson and careless use of campfires and sparks falling off the tailpipes of ATVs and lightning. You know what? I firmly believe, and if I don't believe it, then I'm a climate denialist at its finest, that if I pay more money to Justin Trudeau than the farmer who blew a tire on my road 2 weeks ago on his trailer and the sparks caused a grass fire, the problem is I wasn't paying enough money to Justin Trudeau. So if I had paid more money to Justin Trudeau, then it would have kept the air in my neighbor's tire, and then it wouldn't have caused a spark on the pavement, which then caused a grass fire a couple of weeks ago. So my fault, I guess. I'm the worst. We're all the worst for not voting for Justin Trudeau, as you know.
And that was Sheila Gunn Reed, ladies and gentlemen, from Rebel News there. I should have mentioned that earlier. Yeah, but you heard what the Prime Minister said, though. Okay, you heard what he said. 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off. Yet, why is there 2 million people needing a food bank? Why is there 2 million people that need more food? Why is there people having a hard time getting ahead? Oh, but, we're saving the world, right? Yeah, right.
Stay updated and follow Crusty Canuck on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Telegram, YouTube, and Podbean. Subscribe today and donate at crustycanuck.ca.
And you're back, ladies and gentlemen, episode 284, NATO and the fire tax. I'm your host, Crusty Canuck, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the show. And if you want to support my podcast, please check the link there in the red bubble there. There'll also be a link in the description. Support the podcast by asking me anything in the Ask Me app. That's right. Askme.com at Crusty Canuck Pod. Right. So like I said, it's in the description. Cost you $3. Ask me a good question, and I'll give you a great answer to the best of my ability. Nothing dirty, nothing filthy. I'd really like some more support financially if I could get it. But I'm not going to demand it. I am going to ask. Okay, I'm not going to beg either. But I really, really like some more financial assistance if I can. If you can't afford it, that's fine, ladies and gentlemen. You can ask me questions in the comments, or the next time I do a live stream, that's fine. Or send me an email. All my contact information will be there in the description. But you really help my podcast out if you can start throwing me some clams here and there too. Right? And don't be shy. Anyway, carrying on this episode of the whole episode 284, NATO and the fire tax. Sounds like a band, doesn't it? NATO and the fire tax coming at you live downtown Edmonton. Right? Sorry, I had a bit of a brain fart there. Anyway, so we're looking at NATO, ladies and gentlemen. You know my story. Veteran, 20 years, Canadian Army. Saw my share of stuff. Saw my share of good times. Saw my share of great times, and some bad times too. Seen combat, seen warfare, seen all that good stuff. And I'm not going to brag, but I think it's more than enough to last me a couple of lifetimes anyway. Long story short, when you look at NATO, NATO is supposed to be this big conglomerate that's supposed to help everybody, that's supposed to look after the allies, so we don't have a situation like World War II ever again. Okay. Now, one of those rules with NATO is that every country that's part of NATO puts 2% of its gross domestic product into its defense. That's 2% of all the money that's spent by the government goes into our defense. Now, Canada is now sitting at roughly 1.3, I believe. Now, Bill Blair, and his infinite wisdom as the defense minister, of course, he takes orders from Justin, and whoever orders Justin around takes his orders accordingly. But you see what I'm getting at here, and I'm sure my viewers and my fellow vets, we all know the plight of how the Canadian Forces has not met the standard when it comes to 2%. Now, my libertarian side is very strong on looking after this country. When it comes to other allies, when it comes to other foreign wars, I think we should stay out of it. That's just me, though. But when your friend needs a hand, meaning, let's say one of our friends is getting invaded, we better step up to the plate. That's just my personal feeling. It's not very libertarian, but in the same sense, I'm also pro-democracy too. And nobody likes having their friends fought with. Okay. Now, while I was growing up, the old adage was Canada's need this, Canada's need that, Canada's a bunch of peacekeepers. We can always rely on the States for backup. Well, we shouldn't have to rely on the United States for backup unless it's absolutely necessary, because America, believe it or not, does a lot of fucking work for other countries, and they shouldn't have to. And regardless of how you personally feel about the political machine down south, how our friends operate, why should the American taxpayer have to foot the bill to look after our butts, our British friends, our German friends, our French friends, and every other NATO ally out there? Why should they? Honestly, there is no reason why Canada cannot step up the plate to make the 2%. The problem is, and you've heard me rant about this before, and there's been a lot of projection and conjecture about it. The thing is, we've got too many admins and bureaucrats calling the shots. There's too many procurement boards looking after things, right? It takes so long to get combats, clothing on a soldier's back. They have to make a big deal of it, a big program. You know? My fellow vets out there, who remembers the Close the Soldier program, where they brought in a whole new rucksack and a whole new web gear, the whole tactical vest and the helmet, right? And the CAD pack, right? The whole big spiel. All the posters you see around every military base about the clothe the soldier, clothe the soldier. How much money that cost, I wonder? Hmm, interesting, eh? How much does it cost in taxpayer to advertise? So when it comes to procurement, it shouldn't be a chore, but it's always been a chore for Canada for the longest time. Why? Because there's slaps and tickles here, slaps and tickles there, because there's so many people who sit on these boards, have to scratch their butts, get a slap and tickle, and get paid to decide what kind of tires to put on a goddamn pickup truck, or to decide what kind of screw and nut system you need for the ramp in a lab. And I've seen it, ladies and gentlemen. I've heard some really scary stories when it comes to requiring tires. A simple thing like tires or chairs, right? Or cubicles for every office that sits in every battalion or every garrison or every squadron Canada-wide. It gets ridiculous. It gets ridiculous what computers they gotta buy, or what kind of paper they need, or what kind of pens and pencils they're gonna have for their PP&S catalogs, right? Not to mention the administrative BS that it takes to run a base, right? Not to mention the administrative BS it takes to actually hire someone who acquires said vehicles, to move these vehicles in a timely manner, right? So people forget at times. And Canada's excuse is that a lot of government and senior brass never cared, and they don't. Now, apparently down in the States, Bill Blair received some scathing remarks in a professional manner, mind you, that Canada's gotta step up to the plate. I'm gonna do a video here. Canada's ambassador to NATO, I forget her name. But I was watching this today, and I was just, "Oh, yeah." She makes some valid points, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to procuring defense in this country, there's no more excuses as far as I'm concerned. And I can guarantee you talk to any veteran that served in the '70s, '80s, and the decade of darkness, the '90s, they will tell you straight up too. They will tell you straight up, "Quit dog fucking," you know, or like you used to say, "Shit or get off the pot," right? But, what do we know, right?
Stay updated and follow Crusty Canuck on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Telegram, YouTube, and Podbean. Subscribe today and donate at crustycanuck.ca.
And you're back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 284, NATO and the Fire Tax. I'm your host, Crusty Canuck. And I'll just get the video here for you all to listen to, ladies and gentlemen, at your leisure. And it's just basically about trying to get an actual plan in order to get things on the go. Now, unfortunately, our leaders don't have a plan. They sit there and just give us word salad. So I hate to say it, but it might take an actual war or something terrible to happen for our country to really wake up and smell the coffee.
10 years ago to commit to spend 2% of their GDP on defense by 2024, we were hoping that if allies couldn't meet that target, they would have a plan in place to get to 2% within the next few years. We were pleased to see that Canada is making a pledge to get to 1.7 by the end of the decade. But what we need is for the Canadian government to issue some sort of plan to get to 2% in the years ahead. every member of this alliance is either already at 2%, about 2/3 of the alliance are going to hit that target by the summit in July, or they have a plan to get to 2% in 3 to 5 years. And so we want a situation where we can announce at the summit that every member of the alliance has a plan to get there if they're not there already.
Has it ever been conveyed to you behind the scenes that Canada does not plan to ever do that? Or have there been specifics attached, perhaps behind the scenes, in conveying to you of the fact that it might happen?
Certainly, the Canadian delegation here and the Canadian government has indicated that they take the pledge very seriously. They signed on to it. I think they had, when they signed on to it, every intention, obviously, of eventually meeting the commitment. The question, though, again, across the alliance is, when will we see an actual plan to reach that 2% target and have clarity on how Canada is going to get there? I have not had any instance where any Canadian official has told me they will not get there, but I don't have any sign that there is a plan in place to get to that 2% mark.
I wanted to ask you a question that may be obvious to you, but not to all our viewers. And that is, look, Canada has plotted this chart now, of definitely an increase in defense spending, historically speaking, in this country at 1.7. Why does the extra 0.3 matter so much to NATO?
Well, I'll tell you, the alliance last year at its summit in Lithuania rolled out a new set of regional plans. And what those plans mean is that every ally now has clarity on what they need to have in hand and what level of readiness their forces need to have to ensure that we can defend NATO territory against Russian aggression, against any kind of aggression, and even some hybrid threats that exist out there, things like cyber attacks, for example. So in order to realize those regional plans and execute them as they are designed, we have calculated that we need every member of the alliance to do its fair share. We need every ally to spend the 2% of their own GDP and invest in their own national defense, because those investments pay dividends for the alliance in enhancing our deterrence and defense. And I do want to acknowledge that Canada has made significant increases over the last couple of years, and we are deeply appreciative of those increases, particularly because they are challenging in the current political climate that we all find ourselves in. There are competing priorities, no doubt. But given the state of the global security environment, the challenges and the very real threats that the alliance faces today, the threats stemming from Russia and, again, other corners around the world, it is imperative that every member meet the 2% pledge. And I would note that last year at the summit, we said that 2% should be seen as a floor, not a ceiling.
You made some references to the threat that Russia poses, of course, and what's happening in Ukraine. I think the response from the federal government would be along the lines of, on a per capita basis, Canada is one of the largest contributors to aid writ large for Ukraine, that we are leading the NATO mission in Latvia, and that our presence there is set to increase substantially. Like that the Canada is very aware of the threat that you describe, and has offered, in their view, I think, a disproportionate number and amount of aid in order to address that threat. Is that argument not salient?
Well, look, Canada has provided critical assistance, humanitarian, economic, security assistance to our friends in Ukraine. And like I said at the very top, we do salute those efforts. But every member of the alliance is providing critical assistance to Ukraine. It's a collective effort. And we appreciate Canada's leadership, and we hope we will continue to see it. And we hope all allies will continue their very important assistance to Ukraine. In terms of the leadership role that Canada is playing in Latvia, that is also widely applauded across the alliance. We want to ensure, though, that multinational battalion that Canada has committed to leading is scalable to a brigade. And in order to ensure that battalion is scalable to a brigade, every country that's contributing to that battalion does need to invest in its armed forces to make sure that they have the necessary capabilities and that those forces are maintained at the right level of readiness.
This letter referenced that meeting coming up between NATO allies in Washington, D.C. at the beginning of this summer. And I wanted to ask, I think you've outlined what the geopolitical stakes are if NATO members, including Canada, do not set a path out to 2%. Are there specific consequences for Canada if our government does not come to the table at that meeting with a path to 2%?
Well, ultimately, it affects the way in which we're messaging burden sharing across the alliance. It would be wonderful to come to the summit in July and have all 32 heads of state announce that we now have a situation where 20 or say 22 allies have met the 2% pledge, and that every member of the alliance has a plan to get to 2% in the next few years. That would be the best message to any sort of potential aggressor, or certainly to Moscow, to be able to relay that message. But would there be any sort of penalty? Absolutely not. But I think the fundamental goal here is for all 32 nations to lock arms and stand together on this pledge that we made 10 years ago. We want Canada to be part of that message. We want to have Canada there locking arms with us, making that commitment to the 2%.
Ambassador, I'll leave it on that note. I appreciate your time today, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the thing. We got to commit. We keep hearing pay our fair share, pay our fair share. Great. When has Canada paid its fair share? Now, I'm not dissing the ability and the integrity of my leaders, people who respect me, people who respect you, my fellow vets, but we're looking at the senior leadership and the civilian leadership not doing a goddamn thing. They've been called on. It's that simple. So, is it going to take a nasty war to wake the people up, wake up the masses? Right? Is it going to take American guard for us? Is it going to take Canadian rednecks to stand on guard for thee? Which is it? Something to think about, ladies and gentlemen. Really. As far as I can remember, NATO has been on Canada's ass to do its part. 2% GDP. If the federal government can dish out $600 billion and put us in debt to the tune of $1.2 trillion, then we can upgrade our military, I think. There's no more excuses for it. You can put a lot of people to work to create the northern dew line, to reinforce it, to make it better. A lot of people can put to work to upgrade our bases. A lot of people can still put to work getting things done, to build proper ships, proper submarines, to acquire things. You could get rid of all these boards, all these admins and bureaucrats, and put trained personnel in there to decide what ship is best for the water, what airplane is good for the sky, and what kind of APC or tank is good for the road or the battlefield. That's simple. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, I've been Crusty Canuck. Beautiful 26th of May, 2024. I'm going to put things out there. Let's hope scary times don't come around. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, all that good stuff. You will see me again this Tuesday for another exciting episode of the Crusty Podcast. And enjoy the rest of your evening, ladies and gentlemen. Do what you can up to the trying times. Look after your friends, your loved ones, your neighbors, all that good stuff. It's getting warmer outside, so please hydrate. If you have some overdue yard work, get it done as best you can so you can enjoy the rest of the season prior to the next snowfall. No worries. I'm not anticipating that. I just hope you have a good year and things get done. And do what you can just to help each other out and just try to be good to people to the best of your ability. That's all I can say. So I'll see you Tuesday for another episode. And like I always say, ladies and gentlemen, humanity and America wins the day. Take care. Let's see you Tuesday.
Hit it, sweetheart. Because I am hard, you will not like me. Yes, sir. There is no racial bigotry here. Here you are all equally worthy.
This has been another episode of the Crusty Canuck Podcast. Stay sane and thank you for listening. From Western Canada, this is the Crusty Canuck Podcast.
Well, smack my ass and call me Judy.